So this year I decided to do a winter overseed of my Bermuda lawn, and this time I'm using perennial ryegrass.
Keep it simple and just mow.
Experience tells me anytime I'm doing any type of overseeding project or seeding project, I usually have to go over the area at least twice. So I have to do 2 seeding applications separated by a few weeks. Just depends on soil temperatures, the weather, whether it rained a lot or not. So a lot of different factors go into how many times you're gonna have to seed or overseed. So this year's project is to overseed my Bermuda lawn before it goes dormant. So this way, during dormancy, instead of seeing all brown, I'm gonna see green. I'm only doing the front and side yards, but not the backyard. Instead of doing a regular seeding, I'm actually trying my hand out in pre-germination. It's my first time doing it, and I wanted to see how it goes. I decided to use a combination of 2 different seeds, Hat Trick and Fireball, from a company called Outside Pride. For this project, depending on how big of a lawn you're looking to overseed, you're gonna need a certain amount of buckets in order to dip your seed in. I got 2 Home Depot buckets, but I find because I'm only doing roughly about 18 to 2,000 square feet, I really could get away with 1 bucket. I didn't need to go out and purchase a second bucket, but I did anyway. You're also gonna need a 5-gallon paint strainer. Now, just to put this out there, ryegrass will germinate in as little as 3 days. And because it germinates very fast, usually pre-germination is kind of unnecessary. Pre-germination is really beneficial for people who's planting seed that typically takes a long time to germinate. For example, Kentucky bluegrass. Let me cut in here for a second. I realize as I'm editing this video that some people may not understand what pre-germination is. Basically, you take your seeds, it doesn't have to necessarily be grass seeds, but any seeds you want, vegetable seeds, fruit seeds, flower seeds. You take those seeds, dip it in water a few times. Sometimes you may even allow it to sit in the water for 12 hours, and then you would take it out the water, switch the water out, and just repeat that cycle until you start to see germination. The hope, or at least the goal of it, is to minimize the germination time or the sprouting time of those seeds. And you're looking to minimize the amount of water you're going to use. It's going to decrease your water bill, and you're going to increase your germination rate. That's basically what pre-germination is. You're trying to coat and wet the seeds in order to bypass that phase where you have to constantly water for days. Now, the first thing I did is to time everything. I wanted to make sure I have enough time to tend to the seeds, because the last thing I want is the seeds to start sprouting and I have to go to work. So again, I did it on my off days, and I wanted to make sure my calendar was free to deal with this. The next thing I did is to measure out how much seed I need. I'm looking to put out 8 pounds per 1,000 square foot, and I'm looking to overseed 2,000 square foot, so that's 16 pounds of seed. I measured out about 20 pounds of seed and I put it in the paint strainer. I dipped the paint strainer in a 5-gallon bucket, and I set a paver on top of it in order to weigh it down. I filled that bucket up with water up to the top, making sure everything was filled and covered. And then I let the seed sit in the water for 12 hours. After 12 hours, I came back, swapped the water out, and then refilled it and let it sit there for another 12 hours. Now, I know there's a different method to do this where you can let the seed sit for 24 hours and then you just let it dry out for a little bit and then submerge it back for a few minutes, then take it out. So I'm aware of this method, but the method I use is to submerge for 12 hours, swap out the water every 12 hours. I was actually surprised I had germination starting to progress, and germination took roughly about 5 days, which was pretty impressive. Once the seeds started to germinate, you can see a little bit of white roots sticking out of the seeds. This is my time to start moving. The next thing I did was to scout my lawn down as low as I can go, pretty much down to bare dirt. I made sure to bag the clippings and then go over it again with a regular mower just to make sure I got all the clippings up. While I was doing the scalping, I took the seeds out in order for it to dry. And then I went out to the store, purchased a few bags of Mologanite as a carrier. This is the part that I found was a little bit difficult to manage. Even though I allowed the seeds to dry out for roughly about 3 hours, it was still damp and very soggy. I mixed everything into a wheelbarrow, melogonite and the seeds. I tried to mix it the best I can, turning it over a few times. Even after doing this, the seeds were still damp. Unfortunately, I had to spread it out. This is where I took my spreader and applied it. As I was applying, I noticed the mixture rate was not right. In some instances, I found more melogonite was coming out of the hopper, and then in other instances, more seed was coming out. So it was really hard to get a gauge on exactly how much of each was coming out. I think the hardest part of this project was to get everything out evenly. So once the seed and melogonite was spread out, I made sure to put down a little bit of starter fertilizer, and then I watered the heck out of it. I watered for the first 2 days, roughly about every 4 hours. And during the middle of the day, I did do a little bit of hand watering. And then right before nighttime, I did one last watering and shut the water off for the rest of the night. I wanted to allow the seeds to stay moist throughout the whole night. Here are the results roughly about 10 days later. You can see I have good germination, but unfortunately, as I feared, because I didn't get an even coverage of the seeds, some spots were missed while other spots were overseeded tremendously. So my final analysis is pre-germination does work, and swapping the water out every 12 hours was very easy. The most challenging part was allowing the seed to fully dry, which is almost impossible. The other challenging part was trying to mix the seed in the carrier to get even distribution. And even after I put it out on a spreader, it was still not spreading out as evenly as I wanted to. So another application is definitely going to be needed in order to cover the areas that I end up missing. So at the end of the day, if you decide to do any type of overseeding project, whether you want to use the pre-germination technique or not is entirely up to you. Just know what you're getting into. In the beginning, it was very easy. Just putting out the seeds was a little bit more challenging. It's doable, but challenging. I made a video in the past on overseeding my Bermuda lawn with ryegrass, and I'll link to that video right here. It's the same process, but I did not use the pre-germination technique. I will definitely post a follow-up video next week in order to see the final results of my overseeding project.